This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, Show 2. My mommy's so proud of me.
Welcome to We the SE's podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers, hosted by Ramzi Marjaba, who's sprained his ankle 7 times and counting. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming back for the second show of We the SE's podcast, or We the Sales Engineers Podcast. I appreciate you guys being here. It is true, my mommy is very proud of me. It is also true that I sprained my ankle 7 times. Hopefully, that's it. I don't think my ankle can take another sprain, but I digress. Today's show is with Chandan Mohapata. He's been an SE for a whole bunch of years, and he recently switched jobs to a new role, which he will explain a little bit more in the podcast and describe the differences between being an SE and his current role. I had lots of fun talking with Chandan. I learned a lot, so hopefully you guys will find it useful. If you do find it useful, please leave an honest rating and review at Google Play, iTunes, and SoundCloud. Or SoundCloud. You don't have to do all three. Pick one. I'll be happy with any. Just so that if other SEs are interested and they want to learn a little bit more, they can see it coming through. Just a note before we start, Chandan asked me to mute out the company name and the product that he supports today. So out of respect for his wishes, I have done so. However, you can pretty easily find out which company he works with if you go on his LinkedIn, which will also be in the show notes. So without further ado, let's go. Hey Chandan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Ramzi. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. You know that millions of people are listening to you right now, right?
Sure. I know. I have a lot of fans. What can I say?
Oh, Chandan. I thought it was for me, but okay, fine. All right, man. Well, I know you're busy. We're all busy. Let's just start right away, and maybe you can introduce yourself and
Sure.
like your career trajectory.
Yeah.
Hard word. Who knew? And we can discuss how you got into sale. And I know you just left to join another team, and what the thought process is behind leaving. If you feel like sharing that, we'd be willing to hear it.
Yeah, sure. I've been in here for the last 10 years. So right now my current role is a pre-sales consulting engineer for the focused on the product line. So from a career standpoint of view, I started at that time it was in the support organization, and worked my way through the support organization into various products, and then eventually took the leap into the pre-sale side, which was very appealing for a lot of reasons. One was I spent enough time in the post-sale side, looking at what we deliver and how we support the product, but there was always a deep curiosity into what goes behind selling the product to get to that point where we have a sales support requirement, right? Spent there, I've been in pre-sales now for, I would say, 4.5 years to 5 years now, and still enjoying it. And as you mentioned, I recently switched from sales engineering to consulting engineering, which is it's an interesting role within just that it's also pre-sales, but a lot more focused on the technology and very technically, in-depth focus on the product itself. But it's still very customer-facing. We still do a lot of the activities that you would expect on the pre-sale side. So still enjoying that side of the job, and want to continue being there.
Okay. So you went from support to pre-sales engineer or sales engineer.
Yeah.
And then now you're a pre-sales consulting engineer.
Yes.
I'm curious, in your experience, what's the major difference between support, like post-sales function, versus a pre-sales function?
So pre-sales is, a lot of customer. I guess let's start with similarities and then look at differences. Similarities. Relationship is quite important, as you can see. The post-sales side, the customer's relationship with the product unit, with respect to getting the right support that they need, is key in building their trust and continuing to build the trust that the pre-sales team kind of sold. With the product, right? So in a sense, you see that on a pre-sale side, we sell our trust. That's a big aspect of it, which comes with the relationship, how much they trust you, and then the technology, whether it works for them or not. And after that, the post-sale side, the relationship aspect comes into play, where that relationship which was built on pre-sales carries into the post-sales, and continuing a good support basically gives them the confidence to keep buying more products from you.
Okay. So as a support engineer, did you have a relation with the customer, or are you saying support helps the pre-sales build a better relationship with the customer, or makes it worse?
Very good question. No, very good question. Well, it's not a direct relationship. It's good that you asked me that. So the clarification is that, it depends on the tier that you work on, right? So from just using myself as an example, I spend most of the time in the beginning in the tier 3 support, where we don't always directly interact with customers. There's always, a person or another organization before us, which is the tier 2 support. A lot of our communications and responses usually are enough to go through the tier 2 support to the customers, but there are definitely occasions where you directly interact with a customer. For example, an outage, right? So you're directly talking to them, you're trying to ease them into get at least thinking that everyone's working towards a solution. Having a calm demeanor at that time is what matters a lot, right? So it all depends on person to person who's comfortable in that role, getting in front of the customer directly. Some people are not that comfortable, so all depends on the personality. And that kind of gives you a good idea of what it would be on a daily basis with a customer, right? So getting into the sales engineering side, what you experience on that support call with a customer becomes kind of the norm, at least from a conversation point of view. There would be situations which would get heated up. There's always good and bad on every side. So having that on a daily basis to be keeping or being your best in front of the customer is what you need to decide or need to think about, whether you like that or not, and whether you want to pursue that, right? So
Yeah. And while being a support engineer, you're right. You're mostly facing the customer when something really, really, really bad has happened. So if you
yep.
can handle yourself in that situation, that's a good indication that you might be a good SE, possibly. Which leads me to my next question: like, what makes a good SE?
That's a very good question.
I'm full of those. Like, all my questions are gonna be good for the rest of the day.
No, exactly. I don't expect anything less than
Oh,
that
thank
from
you,
you.
thank you. People might not know, but that million people listening right now,
Yes.
Chandan and I, we've worked together, so we know what each other does or did, and we kind of had a similar career trajectory, just within different companies, maybe. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Exactly. No. Well, yeah. So, what makes a good SE, right? So, when we look at that role, a lot of people have that question, a lot of curiosity for a lot of the new grads, or people looking to change careers, or people looking to understand what the pre-sales role is supposed to be, whether they can work in that space, what are the career paths in that, right? But before you get there, what the good question is, what makes a good SE? What does the role entail? So as me and you know very well, as we have been in this pre-sales role, I think for quite some time now, a sales engineer is basically the technical partner to a sales manager or an account director, right? With that role, they have to put in a lot of different hats. So the different hats being, from the pre-sale side, you are the technical, partner to the sales guy. When you go in front of the customer, you need to know the solution, the technology that you're presenting, and to be able to understand what the customer's problems are. So from a technical standpoint of view, need to be a good need to have a good technical background on what your company sells, what you are focusing, what your products that you're focusing on. Another aspect is that you are a project manager. Not a full time, but you can be a project manager part time. Which entails that, as you can understand, account team would have project managers as well. But what your role would be to work with, from a technical project management perspective, to make sure that what tasks are, being determined are being fulfilled in the right manner, in the right technical capacity, and the right team is involved. So being a guiding hand to the project manager to make sure the right resources are engaged, that's going to be critical. The next hat is going to be a solutions architect. There will be times where you will have conversations with a customer where you may be, giving some technical solutions architecture perspective to a specific problem. So it's not a requirement, but that could be a situation where you could be put into that. So sometimes you may know the answer, sometimes not. So you have to be good at your feet to handle that situation, to tackle these odd scenarios where you may not have an answer. So, an SC needs to understand that he will not always have the answer. There will be someone who will have the answer, and his role would be to identify who he can get to get that answer. The other roles that SC gets to do is sometimes he has to get his hands dirty and do installations. In some places, lab environments, cabling, setting up the POC or the demo equipment, and to the point of even running the demo. That's at least anticipated or expected from a customer, that what you're selling. You have at least a decent amount of knowledge to run the demo on your own, or have someone and assist and be able to fulfill that role as well. So as you can see, multiple hats at different points in the entire sales cycle, and then also not to forget the post sales as well. Sometimes the customers reach out to you with different questions that are related to your products. You provide basic support, not to the point of providing a support to fix an outage. That obviously needs to go through the right support organization, and the right procedures need to be followed, right?
So that's a lot of stuff that you just mentioned, and you are correct in all of those. Not that you need my approval, but maybe we can step back. So when you talk about solution architect, you said you might not know all the answer, and for generalist SEs, I'm pretty sure that's what you were. You sold a very broad range of products, from IP MPLS stuff to optical networks and stuff. So are you expected to technologically be a solution architect for all of these? What's the depth? Okay.
So what you are supposed to sorry, I cut you off.
No,
but
it's you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
It's your interview.
So what you're expected is, like you said, we cover a vast range of products and technologies, right? So there will be within a team, an SC team, there will always be a good mix, or a good team would be a mix of people who have specialized knowledge in some aspects of the technology. Like you said, we both come from a strong routing background, right? So routers, switches, switching concepts, routing protocols is a strong suit, or a strong technical strength for us when we get into this role. But if we bring in a technology that we have not dived into too much, from say optical technology, that becomes a bit tricky, and it's challenging. Don't get me wrong, because you're not just looking at some documents and you're already an expert. You have to spend some time. But in that scenario, I think the general understanding is that you at least know what are the different products within your optical product line, right? What at least in terms of, say, a customer is looking for a specific use case, what you would be able to position, at a very basic level, how much of line ports it has, how many basically mux ponders it has. Based on different requirements, you can at least look at the different products, and then we always have someone in your team or someone in the consulting group that can come in, that can step in to have a more detailed conversation. But you should be at least be able to provide a pick out different products that could fit, and provide at least like that okay, this is product X that can fit his need. Let me provide him some information in terms of a data sheet, right? At least to that level it's expected, but
Right.
not to have a full end-to-end knowledge of all the different technologies. That's very difficult, right?
And speaking of the specialized team, you just moved into such a team, right? You were a
Yes.
generalist SE, and now you're kind of
Specialized.
specialized in one product. So, which is great. Like you can actually have a conversation with the customer, get that information, and maybe relay that to the consultant. And that would have been one of my questions. Like, what is a consultant engineer? And this is where he comes in, right? You give him that information. At that point, do you do like another call with the customer for the consultant now to get more information, or are you expected to relay all the information to the consultant right away?
That's a very good question, right? I mean, it's always tricky. So you're right. I think some of the key ones that SE needs to do is at least understand the problem statement that the customer is trying to solve, or the opportunity, identify the opportunity, and relay that kind of information to the consulting engineering side, or the business, regional business centers, or the different terms that you use to call that group, right? You give them that information where they're able to work together and able to build kind of at least a preliminary solution to get in front of the customer. So the next step would be to have a discussion with the customer, that you may go through a preliminary solution. And in that discussion, actually, you get to identify a lot more in-depth requirements, and the customer starts to, I mean, your role as a consulting engineer is to gain their confidence that, okay, you have a decent handle of the problem statement. That makes him happy because the SE basically conveyed that problem statement correctly internally. And then it makes the conversation a lot smoother, where you're able to find out exactly what they're trying to do, some more details, and then could be a second call where you're actually coming with a proper solution to the customer, saying that this is how our product, say right now, if I'm focused on, if they were going into a data center environment with software-defined networking, or the WAN side of things with software-defined WAN, then I'm able to present all the feature details, specific use cases, how we implement it, and have that follow-up discussions to get to a good point, right, in the pre-sale cycle.
Okay. And as an SE, does your job end once you relay that information, or what's your task at that point?
Well, the SC's job never ends. It's always it's a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days, a year. You're constantly thinking of basically opportunities, right? How to bring in revenue. So as the name suggests, like sales engineer, right? So there is a sales part and an engineering part. So you are putting on both the hats, and your role can start on the pre-sale side. It's a cycle that we go through, right? I mean, we look at opportunities. We have different targets per quarter, or semi-annually or annually. We work towards that, and sometimes the cycles are long. So you could be in a long pre-sale cycles, could be a short pre-sale cycles, then gets into post-sales, where the delivery, the integration of the solution. I mean, your role, you are kind of I would say the liaison between the customer and the product unit, right? So you are kind of the ambassador between the two, along with your sales manager or your account director. So from a technical point of view, you want to make sure that what you sold to the customer is implemented to the utmost satisfaction, right? And make sure you identify any potential roadblocks and try to tackle them. So in general, your role kind of maybe thins out a little bit on the post-sale side. I mean, not as much. On the pre-sale side, a little bit for a while, where you're focused on post-sales to make sure things are going. But once that's kind of handed off, and you think things are going smoothly, you kind of get into another pre-sales or another opportunity, right? We don't stop. So we keep looking for another opportunity, maybe with a different group within that customer organization.
Right. And just to add a note here, the reason you kind of wean off pre-sales when you're doing a little bit of post-sales, just to make sure everything is up and running, because if the customer is not happy, there is no next opportunity. You have to make sure that the customer is happy. But
Exactly.
going back to the example where you brought in another, like the consultant. Well, you are the consultant right now. But if an SE brought you in, what are you expecting of the SE to do for that specific opportunity? Are you expecting to just let go, or are you expecting them to still be there to maintain the relationship, or are there specific tasks that you're asking of them?
So I mean, in my role, or at least I would expect in the consulting engineering role, the group would expect the SE to be involved in the, throughout the process. Because as we keep identifying, different tasks, and some parts of the discussion goes to, providing, a preliminary bill of material, right, or a ROM, basically, right? So just to show them what are the different components, what are the pricing look like, and that is what the SE needs to at least provide to the customer, be able to provide it, and all of these, there are different aspects that come up where the SE steps in. He owns the relationship, right? The account team owns the relationship. Obviously, we also right now have part of the relationship, but it's always through the account team. So he needs to, I would expect that the SE should be in every part of our discussion. So he is in line with the solution we are proposing. He understands that from a high level, and he's in tune. So any future discussions, at least the customer, he's connected, the customer feels that the account team is connected, and it's not like the SE is just handing off to some other person, right, and going off for another opportunity. So to answer your question, we want them involved in throughout the process, as we are in front of the customer discussing, all the various different steps till we hit that sales cycle, right, or make the sale.
I would also expect the customer would want the SE to be there, or at least the SC and the account manager team to be there, just because they're the face of the company at that point. They can't just drop off to somebody else and see you later. Otherwise, why would they want to talk to them again? They just go straight to that guy in the back.
Yeah, but there are exceptions, right? I mean, through this process, as I mean, we are part of pre-sales as well. Sometimes you end up forming a deeper relationship with the customer side as well, right? So sometimes they just end up calling you directly. I mean, you don't have time to suddenly tell them that, hey, you know what, let me patch in my SE. I mean, that doesn't happen all the time, right? So sometimes it bypasses, but I think one of the aspects that I'm hoping to cover is the relationship between all the different groups, like starting from the account team to the project management to the consulting engineering team, all of that. Having the proper communication channel between each of these organizations, and a smooth operation and a trust between them is a key factor to making a successful sell.
Yeah. And to add to that, if someone contacts you like externally, you as a consultant engineer would want to include the account team in there, because they need to know what's going on, especially if it's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, not right away. I mean, not during the call, but I definitely communicate what our discussion was to make sure the account team knows what my discussions were about. If it's a problem, then the account team gets to know about it right away. And if there is some other kind of technical discussion, or we may need to follow up with the pricing or further kind of scheduling in terms of a deep dive, we make sure that the account team knows about it, the sales engineer knows about it, and we follow up. So it goes hand in hand, right? So whatever we discover, we tell the account team, so everyone is on the same page, and that's very important, as you know, right?
Okay, you've mentioned account manager, or sales manager or account director a few times, that terminology. What is the sales manager or account director?
Well, account director is, I guess, on this. I mean, he's a male sales guy, right? So he is responsible for the key relationships and developing all the, inner channels within the customer organization, navigating within the customer organization to identify opportunities, right? To connect with the different groups, to be able to get in front of them, get our products in front of them, uh, you know, uh, build that trust relationship as well from the sales side of things, right? The sales side, there are a lot of aspects, as you can imagine. I mean, taking it from basically pitching the right pricing to the customer, to the support contracts, providing the right level of support structure, pricing for that, making sure that they're happy with working or basically making sure they get feedback. They take the feedback from the customers as they're using our product, and feeding it back through either the sales engineer or directly to us, basically keeping the customer happy, right? If they are using our product, make sure they're happy, and keep hunting for opportunities, and make that relationship at the C levels, and at the VP level as well, right?
Okay, so just C levels for whoever doesn't know what that means. It's the CEO, COO, that sort of level.
Yeah.
Right. How many sales guys do you work with at one time? Like, is it a team that it's just one to one, or do like 5 account managers or sales managers come to you with requests? How does it work for you?
So as you know, I mean, I can talk a little bit about from uh, are you talking about from the consulting engineering or the sales
Sales
engineering?
engineering.
Sales
Well,
engineering, right?
if you
So
want to talk about both, then that'll
yeah,
be
sure.
awesome
I'll
too.
talk about both. So it's interesting question, because the structure for the sales engineering group can vary from company to company, vendor to vendor, right? So at least within, uh, we have basically a sales engineer, depending on the account size. He could be dedicated to one account. So you're always dealing with one account or sales director.
Okay.
Sometimes there are, a section, like basically if you look at the industry, which is public safety, like public safety, government, utilities, that sector, there are a lot of small companies there, right? So having one dedicated SC for a small company doesn't make sense. So he may cover multiple accounts, have multiple sales directors that he's kind of interacting or interfacing with. And from a consulting engineering, by I mean, by default, you end up working with quite a few account teams. So you're serving, basically could be a region, right? You could be a region-based consulting engineer, or you could be basically a set of customers that you're going to be supporting.
And as an SE, how do you manage? Did that happen to you where you had like multiple account directors that you needed to manage? They don't talk to each other, right? And as a account manager should, they all think that their opportunity is the most important opportunity. How do you manage your time between the different account managers, especially if there's overlap?
Good question. So it does happen where you do get overwhelmed, obviously, right? There are a lot of requests happening at the same time. That's a tough situation. What you need to do is you need to have that conversation with either directors. I mean, based on, you have to make a call, right? At that time, that's where your experience comes into play, where you know that which opportunity is a high priority. I know both the sales teams are going to, or so account directors are going to be like, my opportunity is more important. But based on your interactions, you have to make a judgment call which one you would need to drop for the time being, if it comes to that, right? I mean, if you're not able to handle two at once. And then you basically discuss that with your manager. That's when your sales director comes into play. Sorry, say a technical sales director, or the sales engineering director. I'm just going to use both the terms, as they're different. They're used differently in different vendors places. But yeah, they come into play and they help out, right? So you may have some colleague of yours who can step in for a little bit, or the technical director, the sales engineering director, can step in to help out. that's the only option you have, because I mean, you don't want to do a shabby job on both and lose both. You want to be able to make sure that what kind of support you provide is the best, and it results in a positive outcome. Uh, that's what it is, right? I mean, in the consulting engineering group, I can give an example. I mean, that happens all the time, right? So we get requests from all over and all the time, and as you can imagine, there's like, you're always like basically you're trying to provide answers or deliver on something which was required like 2 days ago. It can be, sometimes it happens, right, during the sales cycle, especially towards end of quarter or beginning of the year. It's pretty crazy, right? So those situations where your judgment calls become very important, where you'll have to tell them that, what, this is an opportunity which that money is coming in, and these are going to be tough calls. And if you know that both are strong opportunities, then obviously you need to escalate it to your manager to be able to bring in someone to help out.
Okay. All right. So in engineering, like, still sticking to the topic of like being crunched on time, there's always a new technology coming up. Like, you always have to learn something new. With all that happening, where you have to work pretty much 24/7 to make as many sales directors happy, how do you schedule time, or how do you learn a new skill or a new technology?
A good question. I mean, it's it all depends on the team chemistry, or the chemistry you have, or at least the team dynamics of the sales engineering team, right? It is expected that you are going to be engaged with the customer a lot, but at the same time you need to keep up with the technology. So at least within our company, we have the structure. The way it is that you basically are able to spend or dedicate some time to pick up some training sessions, right? So you are mandated to pick up technology credits, and so those credits involve you looking through videos and new technology training sessions, doing certifications if required. So those are mandated, and every year you have a certain number of credits that we call technical credits that you have to mandate, and you have to meet basically to be okay, right? Not to get basically a reprimand. I mean, that doesn't happen, but it's kind of required. So it's built in. The way the structure is, it's built in.
That's awesome. Knowing that people, like, to invest in your people is the best way for them to sell better. Basically, that's great to hear. When you get to meetings, you talked about the sales cycle quite a bit. What does the sales cycle consist of? Like, do you have phases? How do you, in your mind, how do you classify the sales cycle?
Yeah, sure. I mean, sales cycle, I see, I mean, from my experience, it's basically identifying opportunities, right? That's the key. That's the first step, right? You identify opportunities. You look at basically what the budget cycle is for the customer. So that goes with the account teams or the account director's relationship, where he comes, he plays a big role here, where he is able to identify that, hey, you know what, this is opportunity. When is this target opportunity for the customer in terms of when they're going to implement it or they're going to need it, whether it's going to be this year or this is like 2 years down the line, or an immediate. So identifying the timing is important. How much budget do they have? I mean, does the budget make sense in terms of what they're trying to do? That I find is the initial discovery phase of the sales cycle.
Okay, so the
Right?
first phase is discovery.
Yeah.
Okay.
The next one is basically technical engagement, right? From understanding the problem statement. So that could be kind of a sub part of the discovery as well, right? Like another piece of the discovery piece, which is understanding the problem statement. While you're doing that, you're identifying, as you're doing it, you're kind of in your mind, and through the process, you're identifying what products within your portfolios kind of fit into this, right? And then And as the discussion goes through the cycle, you go into a POC, or a proof of concept, or a demo phase to prove to the customer that your technology can solve their problem.
So before you get to the POC, you're in technical engagement here. You're trying to understand the exact solution, or you're trying to get a general idea of what they want. Like, how much in depth are you getting?
Well, the discovery, the technical, the problem statement, you try to understand say, an example I give you, like in a network, right? So if they're trying to do a refresh on their network, a specific part of the network, then you're looking at what are the port densities, the throughput they're looking at, what are some of the routing protocols that they're looking at, um, what exactly they're trying to solve in terms of what is the underlying service that is going to be run over your product, right? Getting a good understanding of the surroundings around where your product is going to fit in is going to be important, because if there are third party equipment, interop issues, those kind of things you're trying to identify, and you are trying to make sure that that is kind of at least figured out in terms of identifying any roadblocks in front of you.
So you have, like, let's say, an 80% idea of what they want with still room for tweaking, right? Okay. And then you do the POC, right? And I've been on the other end of the POC when I was part of the support team, and that's why I was asking the first question, like, how much do you know? Do you know 100%? Because a lot of times we start working on the POC, and then every day or two, the account manager will call us and say, or the SE would call us and say, change of plans, do this now. So, but that's part of all the. Go ahead.
Yeah. So that, you're right. That becomes that does happen, and you can't avoid it all the time, right? I mean, sometimes it's predefined. It's set in stage, like set in like basically a proper outline that these are the steps that we're going to take. These are the things that we're going to cover, and it goes as per plan. I mean, that's the ideal situation. But there'll always be situations where you will see that people are throwing things at you, where you are being asked to change things on the fly, right? So that goes back to the team that you bring in to help with the POC. Either you know it, or you have someone, maybe the consulting engineer, or maybe the NPI team, the new product introduction team, or the demo team that comes in, that takes in the request and sees if they can adapt to it immediately, right? There will be times, like we said, with questions that customers ask, you may not have an answer. So at that moment, we may tell the customer that, hey, we need a day or two to sort this out, right? And sometimes they're good, and this is kind of your place, or the sales engineering's kind of opportunity to determine what the customer is trying to do, right? This is where your street smarts come into play, where you're trying to figure out, is the customer purposely trying to throw in a wrench in the plan to fail the demo? Their attitude towards your product, it gives you an inclination towards whether your whoever your liaison is on the customer side, is he I would say a champion for you? Is he a neutral person, or is he already decided and he's going to go with some other vendor, and this is just a waste of time for him, right?
So what do you do if you find out it's the third one?
Well, if you find out it's the third one, I mean, you still do as per your duty, right? I mean, your duty, the customer comes first, so you try your best to do this, and on the background, you let the account director know right away that this is what's happening. So that's when he does his magic, and he's able to pull strings or figure out and tackle the situation beforehand, in best way he can to salvage that opportunity, right? I mean, that's an extreme case, right? I mean,
It
I haven't
happens.
faced that yet, but it can happen.
Yeah, well, it's happened. It's happened to me. I know that it's happened to me. And yeah, you're like, we try to figure out why. So we're trying. I didn't ask. I asked you the question, but I'm gonna give you my answer anyways because I have the microphone. Uh, Sometimes the customer doesn't know what they want. They think they want something, but they're trying to achieve something
Yep.
else. right? So as an SE, if someone tells me I want A, I need to know why he wants A. Because maybe you don't want A. Maybe you want a solution that's different than A that will get you to what you actually want. So sometimes they just don't know,
Yeah, you're right. That happens. And like you said, that's the methodology you use.
Yeah.
You ask them why and get them to where they should be or where you want them to be.
Yep. And why questions are very powerful in the sense that sometimes you wake them up to what they're actually asking for. Right?
Yeah.
That's a good point. So I'm going to transition to the not so fire round, which is basically 4 questions. I'm going to ask them quickly and you can take your time answering them.
Okay.
All right. So, other than a notebook and a pen, what is an essential tool an SE should be using? You could say notebook or a pen or a specific notebook.
Well, his ears.
That's a very good answer, actually. That's awesome. Is there any book or resource that you would recommend to sales engineers to read or listen to?
Well, I mean, I can say, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of books out there, right? I mean, it's always, I mean, yeah, I mean, you can read a lot, but to be a good SE, I mean, you have to be flexible. Like I said, some of the points that I mentioned, right? You have to be flexible to put on the different hats, and it's a learning on the job kind of aspect, right? You can read 10, 20 books, but that doesn't make a good SE. You need to have that attitude, the right personality to do that job. And don't get me wrong when I'm saying that, you need to have I mean, if you don't have, or not everyone has good attitude or bad attitude and they cannot be an SE, but it's just more about knowing yourself, right? You need to be true to yourself, and going into the SE role, you need to know whether you can do it or not, right? You can't get into the role and hate the job. That means that you are not suited in that kind of environment.
So, basically, did you have something to say or? No. So, based on what you said earlier, like the attributes of the SE, like the different functions.
Yeah.
But is there an attribute that an SE should have? I'm gonna throw one out. Maybe I'm stealing one from you that you might want to say. But based on what you just said, tenacity is a big one. The fact that you have to fight because you go on a site, they might not like you, and you cannot care about that. You still have to do your job.
Yeah.
So you have to be a fighter, basically. Is there another attribute like that?
Yeah, develop a thick skin.
Yeah.
Right. That's the other way to put it. Right. Develop a thick skin. Be open-minded, flexible, and adaptable.
Okay. Awesome. All right, my last question of the day: should an SE market his products through LinkedIn?
Well, I mean, I would say that you can always share the posts. I would say in that sense, promote your products basically with, if you have, LinkedIn relationships with your customers that you're dealing with, definitely repost it and share it. Right. I mean, the marketing guys will definitely, I would hope that the vendors or the company's marketing team would be posting things, events, successes on LinkedIn. And your job definitely from a social media perspective to get your product out there any way you can, right? I wouldn't say take it upon yourself to create some specific article to advertise, because that you would get your hands slapped for that. But yeah, repost the marketing team's posts and event announcements.
It also means you have too much time on your hand. Go visit your customer.
Yes.
Which is pretty much what every sales guy would ever tell you. Like, hey, you're doing something else. Go visit your customer.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome, Chandan. Well, I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on to the show. This is show 2.
Wow, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show.
Anytime, man. Come back anytime. Well, that was my conversation with Chandan. I really enjoyed the conversation, as I mentioned in the intro. Chandan and I go way back, like almost 10 years now, where we were both working at Alcatel-Lucent. And we diverged to different companies. However, we took a similar career path. And I'm so happy to see him doing so well. And I learned quite a bit from this interview today. I really hope you guys found a nugget or two that you can implement in your day-to-day activities. I think the biggest takeaway is managing multiple account managers might be difficult. So you're going to really need to work on your scheduling and maybe working with your management to figure out what's the best path to deal with multiple requests for your time. You know how it is. Account managers can't live without us SEs. So we will take that. Let's consider it job security. So this was show 2. You can get to the show notes from at wetheSalesEngineers.com/show 2. Or if you don't want to type all that, you can just put in wetheses.com/show 2. If you found that interesting, useful in any way, shape, or form, again, please leave an honest rating and review wherever you listen to this show. If you need to buy anything off of Amazon, you can help me by going onto wetheses.com/resources. Click on any link to Amazon there, and whatever you buy for that day, I actually get compensated a very tiny amount, but it will help me keep this podcast going as long as possible. I'm really enjoying doing this. It is time consuming, but it's so much fun that I really want to do it. So that will help me out. I appreciate you guys listening. I'm looking forward to having you again listen to my show. And with that, my name is Ramsey, signing off.